Hey there, how's it going? My name is Chris Ursua, and I want to welcome you to the first episode of the Chris Ursua podcast, a podcast where we talk about entrepreneurship, psychology, and just random things in life that make it interesting. Now, in our first episode, I have the pleasure of having a guest that I really admire, that is one of my best friends, and that is one of the most talented people that I know, and I always enjoy having a great conversation with him. In this episode, you will get to meet Brian Armentrout, and here's a little bit about his bio. He is a Bachelor of Science in Cellular Biology and Physiology. He's the author of The New Manager Mindset, How to Master the 4 Secrets of Leadership That College Doesn't Teach You. He's the founder of the Food Leadership Group, a consulting firm that has been helping multinational food companies improve their quality for years now with major success. And he's one of the most logical, science-based, but philosophy-driven friends that I have. I think you will really enjoy this conversation, and I really want to welcome you to the Chris Ursua podcast. Mr. Brian Armentrout, such a pleasure, man. Thank you for being here in our episode, number one episode of the Chris Ursua podcast. Don't you feel privileged, Mr. Brian?
I do. I mean, it's amazing. Thank you, Chris. This is quite the honor. Thank you.
Dude, thank you for being here. And let's start things off with just one quick question, which is you're one of my most philosophy-driven but science-based, logical friends. And I want to start you off with something different. So, what is your favorite childhood memory and why?
Oh, what a cool question. When I was about, we'll say probably like maybe about 12, 13 years old, there was a house. So we kind of lived on a bank, and behind this bank was a irrigation river. This was in Wyoming. And we were exploring down there, and we found an old clubhouse. It was abandoned and no one had used it in years. And we're like, oh my God, look at this. And so we figured must be one of these houses that were there who own it. So my friend and I went to the house and said, hey, there's a house back here down in the weeds down here. Can we use that? And they're like, yeah, whatever, knock yourself out, have fun. We're like, yes. And so we had a clubhouse, and it was probably the size of my office. It was huge, but you're a little kid, so maybe it's smaller now. And it was 2 stories, and it had a roof, and we started just absolutely redoing that whole thing. We liberated wood from our parents and other things, and we boarded up the windows, and we made a way to climb onto the roof, and we had a sliding section of the roof where you could climb inside. And we had pieces of old carpet that we found in dumpsters. We had a hammock in there. There was a radio. There may have been some adult magazines, if I remember correctly. And so you would then open up that sunroof and sit up there on that second level and just look out over the city and the bank and these type of things. And that's where we spent our entire summer. It was amazing.
Dude, that's awesome. And I was actually, while I listened to you, a couple of memories came back, and I remember that in one summer, while I was maybe like, I don't know, 12, 13 in Cancun, Mexico, I went to a park that was right in front of my house. And in a bench, we found like 2, 3 adult magazines. Nowadays, I wouldn't even go near them, right? But as a 13-year-old kid, that was a treasure. And I remember that for a whole month, my friends and I, we were like, that was the treasure that we hid like in the middle of a tree, and then we would go back to see if they were still there.
Yeah.
Yeah. Those are the fun moments of childhood. It's always fun. And dude, hey, so you have a very special background that I want people to know about, because you come from let's say cellular biology and physiology background. You've worked in the food industry for many, many, many years in very high levels as a vice president for several companies. You wrote a book about leadership, and now you run your own consulting firm for food safety, and you deal with recalls and a lot of different things. But on the other side, every time I have a conversation with you, we start talking about life and philosophy. And one of the things I want to start this off with is, you talk a lot about philosophy, but what is it exactly in like layman's word, and how does it apply to regular people, everyday business or personal life?
Mm-hmm. Great question. Let's see if I can kind of distill this down. Part of this, Chris, is we all have philosophy. Everyone has a philosophy. It's how we see the world. It's how we operate. We have to. Human beings use our minds to survive. We don't have claws and teeth and fangs and hunt down our prey in the jungle. The only reason we've survived as a species is because of our mind and the ability to abstract think. And part of this then is we're all asking internally three questions all the time, Chris. And that is, what is it? How do I know? And what do I do about it? And with your young daughter, you're seeing this all the time. That is exactly the process that she is going through. Every child has gone through this process of, honey, don't touch the stove, it's hot. Honey, don't touch the stove, it's hot. And the kid kind of looks at you like,
How do I know?
yeah, really? Yeah, I think my dad is just, pulling my leg. Yeah, exactly, right? And then they touch it, and now that is connected. Okay, that is what it is. That is pain, and I do not like that. And that's philosophy. And here's the dirty little secret with this, Chris, is either you choose what you believe or other people will choose it for you.
Interesting. So I look at the situation with my 2-year-old daughter right now, and that's a great example, because you can teach a baby just to follow orders and to never question them and to not test things for themselves, right? And of course, to a certain point, you don't want her touching the hot stove and learning that lesson for herself. You want her to believe in you. But where do you draw the line? Because even nowadays, with all of this mess that we have with information and how narratives are being controlled on Facebook and Twitter, and how social media is a new television, just spreading very subtle or not so subtle propaganda everywhere, you see a lot of people that lost their capacity to question things, right? Like I've met so many people that their whole opinion about something, whether it's politics or food or the next subject, is just like a headline that they stole from Facebook and they never questioned it. So what happens there exactly in your opinion? Like, people just stop questioning. We don't teach people to question things enough and to test them out for themselves. Like the second question of how do I know? That's an important question.
Absolutely. And I think a big piece of this, Chris, is when we are taught in schools, we are taught to memorize facts, memorize dates, memorize the names of states or provinces or whatever. We're not taught how to think, right? How do we know what is it and what do I do about it? That process of mentally evaluating information and determining the correct context is not taught. And that's a shame, because that's what people really need. Your goal as a father is to raise a child who can operate independently in the world and be happy and successful. And you don't do that by operating off of rote memories. Essentially, again, as I said a little bit ago, it's amazing how these things circle back. They are being told what to believe. They are being told a philosophy, and they have no underpinnings. They are just given rote statements that are arbitrary, and they accept them as rule. And when you question, that's what you see, right? When you question people on these things, even asking a simple question such as, well, why? People get angry, right? Because they can't answer. They don't know why. They're inside an information bubble, and they can't see outside of that.
And it's a very binary process, right? So a lot of people have the what is it? I just grab like a Facebook title or a news title that kind of resonates with my belief that I already have. And then I don't really have to question it. I don't have to go through the process of thinking about it. And I'm just like, this is what I believe. Either I resonate or it's black and white, or one or the other. And there's no middle ground, because in the middle ground, I have to think. And man, that's hard, right?
Right. Yeah. And so you have to develop a philosophy and rules around society, because we are social animals. We do not operate independently. We have to interact with each other for mutual benefit. And in order to do that, we have to understand the rules of the game, as it were. And we have to teach and understand those rules associated with this. So, for example, property rights, fundamental, right? If you do not have the ability to keep what you produce and what you have earned from your efforts and your abilities and have property, nothing else flows. If someone can come into your house at any time and take your belongings because they need them, you no longer have property rights. And as a result of that, society breaks down. Imagine, and you see these videos on YouTube, Chris, of people going into stores and just taking everything. How long is that going to work?
Yep. Not for very long.
Not very long.
So going back to philosophy, I like this framework of three questions of what is it, how do I know and what do I do about it? And I
Yeah.
see an abundance of people stuck between the what is it? I grab the easiest thing that I can just attach my identity to and I just give it a definition, black and white. And then I don't actually do the second question. It's not, I never do how do I know? It's just I know it because everybody's saying so. And
Mhm.
then I see a lot of the last question as well. What do I do about it, right? People get angry, people react, people either are passive, they ignore it. So I see that there's a missing spot right in the middle, right? About
Right.
questioning the simple ideas that we come up every single day within social media and everything in life. And when it comes to philosophy, what do you think, or how have you, is it just simply getting into the habit of asking this? Because we're busy. We have so many roles. We're doing so many things. I'm being a father. I'm being an entrepreneur. I'm building stuff. I'm creating things. If I had to question every single thing in my life, that would be hard. And it also comes to a fact that I don't know if you've realized, but in life, we've seemed to just delegate a lot of things we don't want to think about it to other people, like our
Mhm.
health to doctors, right? What do we want to eat? What's good for us to the government, right? Or whatever the food pyramid is right now. Then, or childcare is just drop the kids to school and have them programmed by somebody else, right? And I think it comes down to kind of like a similar thing. We're either being taught to not question and just delegate,
Mhm.
or we're maybe, and here's where I'm getting very conspiranoid, getting suppressed. Like we're so busy working, and they want us to be so busy working and producing and making the ecosystem so hard that maybe we just don't have time to question things.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and part of this, right, is this is an ongoing process through your life. And as part of this, it's like becoming a good golfer, Chris, in that, I'm a terrible golfer. And so you go to the golf range and you're trying to hit the ball. And someone walks up, the pro at the club, and they just effortlessly swing. And you're just like, oh, how did you do that? And they're like, what do you mean? How did I do that? You just get up and hit the ball. They've automated that process. It's the same with philosophy, right? You have to start, and this works both directions. You can have an automated philosophy that you're completely unaware of. I don't
Hmm.
like that. Well, why? I don't know. I just don't like it, right? And it's most conversations, to your point, stop there. If you have an automated process that you have developed, and right, this is not easy. That these things that we're talking about, but if you develop those muscles around that, it helps you to identify the important things. Right? There's a hierarchy of things that you're doing in the world. And as you move through that hierarchy, you have a base. And that's what we're talking about really when we say, what is it? How do I know? And what do I do about it? And then you go up through that hierarchy and you move on to more abstract principles because everything ties to reality. And it gets back to there's kind of two main competing philosophies in the world, and this hasn't changed for 2,000 years, longer really, in that there's the philosophy of Aristotle, then there's a philosophy of Plato. And Aristotle was the student of Plato.
Mm-hmm.
Plato had the view that we can never understand the world. Everything is shadows, right? So we can only see an image of reality. We can't really see reality. And you hear that in people all the time when they say things like, well, that's your reality, that's not mine. That's not my truth, that's your truth.
It comes
No.
down to perception, right? To a
Right.
certain point, because whatever I'm looking at that is reality, I'm filtering through my own experience or thoughts. Is that what you're getting to?
Well, let's juxtapose it with what Aristotle was saying, which is he took the opposite position and said, no, there is a knowable reality. And he's very famous for the saying A equals A. And that is shorthand for saying a thing is what it is. And what your daughter is going through is developing that.
Hmm.
Because a stove, if it's on, is always hot. There's never an instance where she touches a stove where it's glowing, where it's cold, right? It's always hot. Birds fly, dogs bark, cats meow, all these type of things.
Mm-hmm.
Everything has an identity in reality. The Aristotelian view of reality is there's a reality out there. We're born into this world. We're born into this universe. It doesn't care about us. It is what it is. It is our job as thinking beings to go out into the world and determine what it is. And that process is thinking. And Aristotle said the world is completely knowable. Now, people get these concepts confused because human beings have the ability to alter the world around us. We create buildings, we create wonderful places to live in where we can escape the heat, and we have abundant water at our fingertips, right? All developed through our minds, right? And shaping the world. That's the man made. But it operates under the rules of reality. We cannot change those. And anytime a philosophy comes along that says that, no, reality is what we think it is, that's very, very dangerous.
I actually had an interview a couple of months ago for my Spanish content side of things with an actual physicist, right? Somebody that's been teaching physics for like 30 years in a university in Mexico, one of the highest rated universities. And we ended up talking about Joe Dispenza and this whole concept of how thinking, just the act of thinking, will change physical things within your body, right? And it was very, very interesting because I come from a self-development kind of world. I come from a motivational kind of thing. And it was just overwhelming. And he actually gave me every single answer with studies, like science-based studies, on how, well, basically self-help gurus just grabbed like one particular study, and then they kind of gave it the reference that they wanted to make this whole genre of just think about it and it will appear kind of thing. And he was very, very, very clear with proof and scientific data on how that's bullshit. But then I have a bunch of friends that have gone to Joe Dispenza's events. I've read his books. I can tell you that even to a certain point, this whole The Secret and manifestation and thinking about things that then become your reality, I have felt that in my life, right? So it doesn't make it real because I've felt it or because I've thought that I've actually seen it happen, like in the actual Aristotle's reality kind of thing. Like maybe science can't prove it, maybe science can see it, but I don't know if it's us humans trying to look for answers in wrong places, or it's just coincidence, or what do you think about that whole like dilemma?
And that's what's very interesting and exciting about all this, right? What we're finding out as a species is the more we learn, the less we know. Right? So we find something new about physics. And so if you go back to Newtonian physics and these type of things, everything seems very clear. You would write a formula, this is how gravity works and things like this. And then Einstein comes along and says, well,
Not really.
kind of, right? But there's these other things going on. You want to blow somebody's mind. If you're listening to this, don't do it now, but at some point in the future, is gravity real? Look it up. Gravity's not real.
Is that like a big rabbit hole?
Right?
Interesting.
Now, does that contradict reality? No, it doesn't. That is us figuring out reality. Now, on the perception side of thing, here's my opinion on that. So we have an area in the brain called the RA, the reticulating activator, right?
Mhm.
Where if you're interested in something, this is a survival thing, right? This is something our ancestors millions of years ago learned. And so, for example, if I'm in the market for a new car, I'm like, I really like that new Subaru. That's a sharp vehicle, man. And then all of a sudden, I see Subarus everywhere.
Mhm.
Did I manifest those Subarus? No, it's
I'm
just
just
my
more
brain
aware.
is aware, right? And that's what people are. This is fascinating. This is why magicians, Chris, are so successful, is because we think that when we're seeing the world, we're seeing everything. No, not even close. There is way, way too much information out there in reality. We are seeing a small little piece as our eyes move around and our brain looks at different things, which is why when a magician says, look at my hand, I'm doing this, but reality, they're really doing something over here, right? And then,
Mhm.
oh, here's the coin, right? They are manipulating our perceptive abilities and how our minds work. It's the same thing.
And it's one metaphor that actually helped me understand that. I don't know who gave me this, but he was explaining that just like a computer has ports where we input information, like a USB port, right? And that's a way you plug in a USB and you download a couple of gigabytes of information. We as human beings, our hardware, we have the same ports, but we just call them eyes, we just call them skin, we just call them our nose, or ears, whatever. And the problem is that we're trying to input, 1,000 terabytes of information per second into ports that are extremely small, right? So we're
Yeah.
just getting like very little information of what reality is actually out there showing us, right? And you can prove this through, let's say, dogs, right? That they see different spectrums, or cats that they hear different spectrums of sound that we're not even conscious about it. So
Right.
I think the interesting part is that I do, and this is my opinion. There's a lot of theories, guys. We're not like uh, we're not pretending to have the absolute truth on anything. But if you ask me, when it comes to theories, I think that there is a reality that we can observe and that we can quantify, but that it's so overwhelming. There's so many things that we still don't know that it's very hard for the human mind to operate in uncertainty, right?
Mhm.
Like people do not want to come to the fact that we are very simple mechanisms to a certain point that cannot consume everything that's out there, and that there might be things that we can't explain, we can't see, but that doesn't mean that they're not happening, and that doesn't mean that they're myth or that they're not science. We're just not able to comprehend that yet. It's overwhelming if you think about it.
Well, and that's the process we go through our entire lives. And through life, it's very interesting, is that it seems to me the people that are the happiest in life, the ones who we see on TV, the 80-year-old who started running marathons or started learning karate or things like this, the people who are happiest in life are the ones who continuously grow and learn through their entire lives. They don't
Mm-hmm.
stop. We all know people, and we can identify them very quickly when we see them. People who quit learning at a particular point in their life. And they said, you know what? I know enough. I'm
Mm-hmm.
good. I'm going to watch TV all night long. Fine. And nothing stays the same. There is no homeostatic position for anything. You're either growing or you're degrading, right? So those people are degrading slowly over time and they don't even know it. That's part of the key, I think, from my personal viewpoint on things of how you grow and improve and have a happy life.
It's super interesting. And now I want to do a little segue here because we're talking about philosophy, about logic, about reality. And you are a couple of years older than I am, and you've had a very interesting life experience. I've known a couple of your stories about your family and where you've come from and all of your background. But the more I grow, and especially now that I have a baby daughter, right? Babies and kids are just like a reflection of how time passes by super quick, because you start remembering how you were at that age, and then you see them grow week to week, and it's just like a massive reminder of, hey, time is flying by.
Yeah.
What is a lesson that you think that men understand too late in life? And I'm talking about guys, right? Like, what is one lesson that maybe from your own experience you want, like, crap, I see that people just get this wrong, or they come to this understanding very late in life and it's causing them pain?
Right. I think a big piece of this, and for perspective on that, the older you get, the clearer this becomes. When you're young, you're immortal, right?
Mm-hmm.
There is no death. You don't think about things like this. The older you get, it becomes natural. You lose family members, you lose friends, and these things progress, and it becomes more and more obvious in your life. Um, but I think really, and this ties in almost directly with what we were just talking about, is it's your reason for living with an emphasis on your reason for living. Now, part of what we are as men is we're providers, right? And we're caring and we're nurturing and we want to help, right?
Mm-hmm.
Men want to help. If we see a car broken down by the side of a road and there's an old lady there, standing there going, right?
Mm-hmm.
Pull over. And we do it because it's how we're hardwired. But the problem there is you cannot sacrifice yourself to that, right? You have to understand why you're living. And when you see these videos on YouTube or things like this of the top regrets of the dying or things like this, when I watch those, there's a common thread for those, and it's regret. And with that, people look back and they evaluate their life and they say to themselves, I didn't live my life. I lived it for other people. And that's a huge mistake.
Hmm. That's interesting. So I'll recap it in my own way. We're so hardwired, some of us, to provide, to take care of people, whether it's your family, your partner, whatever,
Mhm.
that time flies by and eventually you look back and you're like, oh, that's the only thing I've done. And right now with my family situation that's growing and we're right at that spot of adjusting 2 years with a baby, you see it like our life right now is 100% providing. And
Yeah.
we used to be like an independent, like a single or young adult family. And now with a kid, it's just like 24/7. And
Yeah.
one of the ways I've tried to see it is asking myself, what would I like my daughter to look back in life and go like, oh, I remember my dad was always like that. And I
Yeah.
do want her to remember that I was a good provider, that I was present, that I played, that I loved her. But I also want to leave that example of he had me, he had kids, but he also followed his dreams or he followed his goals, whatever that is. You might want to be a
Yeah.
big entrepreneur, might want to be a dancer, I don't know. But I think that's a great, great, great lesson. And
Mhm.
time flies by like you have no idea. And moving from that, that's a great lesson. I would ask you, your logical side, your love for science and questioning, where did that come from?
Mm. I think it's always been there.
Mm-hmm.
I remember, doing, like building things when I was a child and building mazes and running my hamster through the mazes. For a science project in the eighth grade, I designed a bomb, right?
What did you
And,
blow
and of
up?
course, right, this was a different time, right? You could,
Uh-huh.
nowadays you get locked up or things like this.
Yeah,
And,
yeah.
it was just a thing on paper. And it was because of something I saw in the science class. And it's like, oh, sodium reacts with water. That's really cool. I wonder if you could figure out a way to harness that reaction, right? It's just that curious nature and that inquisitive mind type thing. And it's always been there.
Okay. So there wasn't like one main point of influence, somebody in your family, your parents, an uncle, somebody that you met, because I don't, that's a whole other subject, right? Like a lot of
Mhm.
people go like, oh, kids, they just have something in their DNA or they have like something that comes with them that makes them different, right? It's not only the social aspect of things, the family, the school, the media, whatever. They have something that's ingrained in them that just it's genetic, right?
Yeah.
You think it was something from that early on, or maybe it was something on like the external side of your family or ecosystem?
Hard to tell. I don't know. I mean, here's an interesting juxtaposition on that. You hear about people who are in car wrecks or serious accidents, really terrible things, and their brains are injured,
Mm-hmm.
and they recover, and they're completely different people.
Hmm.
So they lose part of their brain, and then everything rewires, and their family members are like, "This is a completely different person. They act different, they talk different, they are interested in different things," and it just shows how much of that, to your point, Chris, is hardwired into how we do things. The human brain is not completely developed until around age 25, and there's a big chunk of that. So with your nerves in your body, you have myelin. There we go, myelin that is
Mm-hmm.
around the nerves, and that isn't complete, and that process of developing that myelin isn't done until you're 25. And that's when you hear this phrase from people of your brain is plastic at this point in time,
Hmm.
because you're developing these pathways and figuring these things out. And what's really interesting with that too is, from an evolutionary standpoint, the approach children take as well, which is different from adults, in that you can pretty much tell a child is before a certain age anything and they'll accept it as truth, right?
Hmm.
Santa Claus, Easter
Mm-hmm.
Bunny, your ghost,
Yep.
whatever. I remember when I was a kid, an uncle told me that you should never sleep in moonlight because you'll turn into a vampire. And I woke up one night and it was a full moon and the curtains were open and the moonlight was on me. And I'm just like, oh crap,
I want to be that type of uncle for someone one day.
right? Well, what's funny is then you get older and you realize your uncle was a jerk, right? You're
Yeah,
like,
yeah,
oh,
yeah, that's
he was messing
hilarious.
with me the whole time.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, and it's because children, I think this is probably an evolutionary thing, because the children, the small 5-year-old children who questions everything their parents told them and ran off.
Mm-hmm.
No, no, don't go near that. It's a tiger. Ah, you don't know what you're talking about. Rawr, right now, that
Mm-hmm.
was the end of that child. So those gene lines didn't survive.
It's super, super interesting because I like if I look at my own example, like one of my characteristics that I've always had, like I can say I've always had, like you've had this appeal for science and logic, I've always been extremely organized, very, very organized. But I can look at my past, or maybe this is a narrative that I built through years of therapy because my dad is a psychologist, right? And I ended going to therapy since I was like 13, 14 to figure out my whole adolescent things or whatever. And the conclusion or the reasoning behind me being super organized and perfectionist that is very good for certain things, but is also very painful for other things because you're very rigid, you're not flexible with yourself, you're like you go on guilt trips and you just feel guilty when you don't achieve things. Was that my parents both were extremely young and extremely, I don't want to say irresponsible, but they were dealing with certain things. Like my dad, it was an alcoholic, and then he's been clean for 32 years. My mom was 20 years old, and then I brought like this mindset of, hey, I need to take care of myself. I need to be very, very freaking organized because I'm not sure about what's going on around here. I felt love. I had everything. I never missed a meal. Like I'm not gonna give you that story, but that's the reasoning that therapy gave me to understand why I was acting that way. And I can't really remember something that's like in my genes that I could go like, oh, this has been me since day one, even before that.
Yeah.
Interesting. What do you think about psychology? Like a logical guy like you, do you go to therapy? Do you not really like it? What do you think it achieves? Because for me, it's worked. For me, it's like the way I would look at it. It has two functions. Therapy helps me, number one, just blow off steam,
Yeah.
like really just oof, talk and develop a narrative that explains why I feel a certain way. And the second thing is that if the therapist is really good, the second benefit you get is that he helps you create better narratives for your present. But that's
Mhm.
only if the therapist is good. If not, a lot of people just go like halfway there and just like blow off steam and they never get to any type of conclusions and stuff. But what do you think about it?
Yeah, I mean, so overall, the social sciences, just like other sciences, are growing and learning, right? And in
Mm-hmm.
a lot of ways, we're behind in those areas compared to other fields, where the hard sciences know more, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
people are complex, and the big piece of it, and again, right, this is where philosophy ties back to everything, is yeah, if philosophy, if you know, if going to a psychologist or these type of things helps and talking about these things, great, but using the ability to find that good match. That's where philosophy comes in. So if you were to go to a therapist who was a woo woo, let's go outside and chant around the tree
Mm-hmm.
and get in touch
Nothing
with
wrong with that. Just
get
do
in touch
whatever
with our
you.
ancestor spirits or whatever, right? Yeah, right for some people,
Uh-huh.
but if it's not right for you, right? You need to be able to determine those things. It's no different than buying a car or anything else. There
Mm-hmm.
needs to be a match there and make sure that that person can help you. Because I mean, part of it too, and this is very interesting when you listen to lawyers and detectives and people who use these type of skills, we think our memories are locked in, and this is what happened in
Mm.
1989, and I remember it exactly. No,
Not at all.
no,
I can't remember what I had for breakfast yesterday.
yeah, human beings, our memories change, and our memories modify over time. And part of it as well is it's also what does that mean to you? We've all heard the story of the son of an alcoholic,
Mm-hmm.
and there's two sons. One becomes an alcoholic and the other one doesn't, and they both have the same reason why. It's like, well, look at my father. Of course, I'm not an alcoholic, and vice versa,
Mm-hmm.
right? Uh,
They're
and that,
using a they're using that as an example with Arnold Schwarzenegger, who's a big idol of mine, and he had
mhm,
two kids, and one of them is like super super ripped, and the other one has like a big overweight problem, and
mhm,
they've used that story with him recently. Yeah, it's
interesting.
interesting. Yep.
Yeah, we have, and that's what's amazing. That's what's so great about us is we have volition and we can make choices. And how we learn and how we integrate information brings us to good choices, hopefully.
Definitely. So that's the importance of those three questions we started off with, right? What is it? How do I know? And what do I do about it? Now,
Exactly.
going back to philosophy, let's talk a little bit about business. Like, one of the things that I've always admired of you is that you've been, yes, science based, but extremely successful when it comes to your professional life, either being an employee, an entrepreneur. Since I've known you, for those of us, the people that are listening to us, we actually met on an online course where we both spent like $5,000 to learn how to launch an online business, and that's where we met and we hit it off pretty quickly. But what would you say is your own philosophy when it comes to business? Can you sum
Uh-huh.
it up like in two, three core values, or how would you sum up your business philosophy or your approach to being successful in business?
Uh-huh. So it's very interesting. And so for about 3 years, I do a live stream on LinkedIn, YouTube, and Twitter every week. And I bring a guest on to talk about a particular subject, a technical subject. And this is
Mm-hmm.
how this started. And what's very interesting is I think we've done 136 episodes now. And I've gone back through and cataloged those episodes, Chris. Half, half of the episodes are about career development and personal activities, not technical. Here's what I've learned in my career. It's very important, right? So as we talked about here in the opening, right? I'm a cellular biologist, physiology, pre-med degree, all these type of things, very technical. Worked as a microbiologist and all these type of things. Those skills are important, but they're not as important as the people skills.
Mm-hmm.
That is what matters. And so once you rise to a certain level in any organization, and even dealing with like what we do in our businesses, it's the people side. Because if I have all this wealth of information and let's say I'm an amazing physicist who has all kinds of information, but I'm a major jerk, who cares? Who cares? It doesn't matter. Plus, when you work in a technical field, you have to be able to explain concepts to non-technical people. And if you think about it, who are the CEOs in companies? They're not the quality assurance, food safety people. It's salespeople, marketing people, finance people.
Sometimes, yeah.
Sometimes, yeah. It's that side of the business, and you have to be able to communicate them and explain to them the why of why things are done. And then using that skill set then to help bring along that next generation and teach those lessons too. Because I see, Chris, way too many people who think, okay, I want to advance in my career. In order to do that, I need to learn more. I'm going to take more courses. I'm going to get more certifications. No, that's not it.
It's interesting because specialists, like people that have masters and PhDs and that just hyper focus on very niche technical things, it's rare that they ever become, professionally speaking, and there's nothing wrong with this, more than an employee or a self-employed kind of role, right? And it's usually because either they're not interested in the soft skills or human skills. You've heard them. Some of them just go like, oh, that's bullshit. I just want to be good at what I do, and the rest should just come around me because I'm so talented. Or because they're just so absorbed with that like being a specialist requires time. They just have to be studying it so much. And I do have to agree. So if I sum things up, your philosophy or one of your main philosophies when it comes to business is that it's not enough to be a very good technical specialist, but that the core way to excel in this business world will be the soft skills, the human skills, leadership, sales, communication, influence, all of that, right?
Right. So one of the things that I teach people who work for me is that there's two main buckets of decision in what I do in quality assurance and food safety and these type of things. Food safety, obviously, there's no compromise. It's either it's safe or it's not safe. And if it's not a safe product, it cannot go to market, which is why we can confidently pick up our drinks in our desks as we're chatting here today, drink our water, drink our tea without a second thought because we're being protected. The other side of that is determining things that are a business decision. So quality are those attributes and things that you as a consumer expect. So the flavor and the mouthfeel. And so every time that you drink a Coca-Cola, it's the same experience every time. If it varies from that, you complain. That's quality. So with that, there's a business decision associated with that. Does the business take a risk with this attribute? Does the business move forward with this particular design change? Because it can be better, it can be worse, but people complain when something is different. So being able to delineate your information in those two buckets is hypercritical. And one of the things that I've found is a lot of quality people don't understand that. They think that everything is a life or death decision, and they fight on things that they shouldn't fight on, which is a huge mistake in their careers.
And I call that like getting the big picture. Like in our companies, I have people that are very good at what they do. I might have like a great copywriter or a great marketer or a great salesperson. And I love that they're specialized and they're good at their operational tasks every day. But then I have some people that just they're good at what they do, but they also get the big picture. And they I don't know, it's very different when you handle, let's say, a salesperson that complains about a minor thing or he wants to change something without the context of the whole company. And then the salesperson that actually has a deeper interest in understanding the company, in just understanding how everything works and how complaining about something might be kind of stupid on the big picture, right? So yeah, that's interesting.
Yes, it's So getting back to kind of this reflection piece that we talked about a little bit ago, Chris, is as you mature through your career and you accomplish things, what's very interesting is the things that make you proud. The things that I am most proud of in my career is the people that I've helped develop. So there are people running quality assurance in food companies at multi-billion dollar companies that are now senior vice presidents who worked for me. And hopefully I had a little small piece in helping them to develop.
Mm-hmm.
But I also know that at any point in time, if I have a question or I need help, I can pick up the phone and they will do whatever I ask them to do because we've developed that relationship.
That's awesome. And here, that's kind of like a good side of human resources and training people and all of that, right?
Right.
You are a good leader, you add value to somebody's life, they develop skills, they become more valuable in the marketplace, they grow. But then there's also, and this is a common saying between entrepreneurs, that the people that you help the most tend to be sometimes the ones that are the least grateful or the
Mm.
ones that are just kind of like they, I don't want to say rebel, but I've seen that in my experience. And actually right in the pandemic we had this major crisis because one of our companies, 50% of the revenue came from live events. We had a recurring credit line with a online advertising company of like 300K per month, so it was a mess, right? And in that crisis where we had to shut down a huge part of our operation, it was funny because I I received incredible uh, gifts of gratitude and support from people that I didn't necessarily expected, and then from people that had been like my right hand and people that I had supported in ways that it was like not even a professional relationship, like somebody that you went out of the way to help them out, move from another country, get established, do a lot of things. um, it didn't happen. It actually went the other way, and that's the people that end up suing you or that just like end
Yeah,
up doing crazy things. So, what have you had experiences like that, and what do you think about them?
they're going to happen, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the alternative is worse. It's like, oh, okay, I'm not going to help anybody. Screw everybody, right? That's a
Mm-hmm.
terrible way to live.
It.
You have to put yourself out there, right? It's no different than relationships or things of this nature, right? You date people, you date some people that are bad matches, and it doesn't work. And some people come along, and you're great matches, and you are together for a period of time, and then things change, and you move apart, or things like this. That's life, right?
Mm-hmm.
And human beings are complex, and part of this is too. And when those type of things happen, where I may be feeling betrayed or that value wasn't returned for what I'm offering or things of this, is we have no idea what those people are going through, right? I'll try and remember that. And in the moment when you're upset or you're angry, of course, that's going to be difficult to do.
Mm-hmm.
But if you can step back and give that perspective and say, well, geez, maybe that person, maybe their mother is dying of cancer, or maybe there's a family relative who is doing, who knows, right? Well, we never know what other people's lives are. And to make it more complicated, people put up fronts, right,
Mm-hmm.
as well. And a lot of people will present what they think they want you to see, and then they put on that mask as well. And this is another way that philosophy and the ability to see through these things can help, because I've had many a conversation with people who I thought were intelligent or smart or well-rounded or things of this nature, and I had conversations around what we're talking about today, and it became very clear that
Mm-hmm.
this person was not on the same page as I was. But okay, that's fine, right? There's no right answers associated with this, right? We're all trying to find the best way through life, and we all need to figure that path for ourselves. But that wasn't someone that I wanted to bring along with me on that path.
Yeah, and it's totally right. It's like not hiring or not scaling because you don't want to have issues with employees because you've had them in the past, like I have. It's like
Yeah,
not wanting to fall in love because you don't want your heart broken.
yeah,
That's a way to operate out of fear, out
yeah.
of just kind of like being scared and not wanting to be vulnerable to growth. And it's interesting how I do believe that entrepreneurship is just self-development, like having a solid, I don't know, relationship, having kids, and building a business. I think those are like three activities that will really be like a mirror to what's going on inside of you. For me,
Mhm.
during this pandemic and these situations, I think one of the biggest lessons was that I fall in love with my teams. I want to train them. I want to give my best, but I also don't put a lot of limits, right? So everybody in your team ends up being like your best friend, and you create expectations of how a friend should act. But at the same moment, you're actually paying them, right? So there's always like that little thing that makes it very different, like a real relationship from a business or a work relationship. In my way of approaching business in the last 15 years and having a team of 70 people and everything, there's always a difference. And there's like a line that you don't want to cross. I don't know how you feel about that.
Here's something that I think is a profound statement. We'll throw it out there for the audience to see if they agree or not. Money is simply a measure of value, not necessarily for goods, but for people as well. Let me give you an example. We see time and time again someone who wins the lottery, a dirt poor person living in a trailer house or things of this nature, right? On their last $10, and they win 500 million in the lottery. We see time and time again, within 5 years, that money is gone, right? They're completely destitute, and they're right back where they started, because they did not understand the incredible responsibility and ability that goes with taking care and creating, right? We say in America, money is created. We make money. And that's an extremely true statement. We create value, and money is the reward for our efforts. And if you don't have that side of the equation, it's going to leave you. And just juxtapose, let's say, for example, you won that $500 million in the lottery, and you went to Elon Musk and said, hey, Elon, I would like to give you this 500 million to invest in your companies. Within 10 years, you're going to have $5 billion from that investment, right? Because he knows what to do with it. He would probably immediately say, yes, 500 million. Now I can build that new rocket engine that I wanted to build, right?
Yeah.
And start sending tourists into space.
And then complain about it on Twitter.
Exactly. So money is a measure of value. And you hear these questions from people who don't understand this. Well, look at all that money that they have. Why do they need more? No, that's not what it's about. That's not what it's about.
And this brought back a story. This was maybe like 8-10 years ago. I was living still in Santiago de Chile, and I went to a conference of this like guru coach that I didn't really like, but I wanted to see his whole thing, right? And I was in a VIP pass having dinner with this guy on a table of around 10 people. And there was this couple that was clearly having a weight issue. Like they were both very, very overweight. And when it was like their time to ask a question to this mentor, they go like, hey, we just received an inheritance of around $1 million, right? And what do we do with it? What would be the best thing to do with it? And the answer that this mentor gave them for the Chris of 8-10 years ago was horrible, because he was very, very intense about it. But I also feel that there was certain truth about it. His answer was like, first things first, you're not going to do anything with that money, at least for a year. You're going to put it somewhere where you can't even touch it. You're just going to study money. You're just going to figure out investments. You're just going to read how people do massive mistakes where they run into money. And the second thing you're going to do is that you're going to handle your weight situation, because you clearly have an issue with that. And money tends to make things worse when we have issues in our life. And I was like, oh my God, he's bringing up the weight situation. This guy's an asshole. Just give him a marketing investment tip or whatever. But at the end of the day, looking back at that, I'm like, that makes total sense. Like money will amplify bad things in you. And it was very hard to hear, but it was interesting. So, dude, I have another question for you, and I'm gonna change subjects radically, because I do believe that as entrepreneurs, business owners, and this podcast, it's our first episode, but we want to make it very, very integral, right? Talk about a lot of things. And having a food specialist here, somebody that's been in the food industry for many, many, many years, I do believe that for entrepreneurs, for business owners, what we put in our body ends up being in our mind, ends up being in our actions, and it defines so many things. With your experience and like your insider knowledge of the food industry, what do you think is the biggest mistake that the food industry is doing right now at a massive level? I'm not talking about the small things. I'm just like at a level like it affects society. What do you think is the biggest mistake that's going on with the food industry?
Well, that's an interesting question in that. So operating within companies, I think we can probably expand this to companies overall, is the natural life cycle of a company. And I think the biggest risk that companies have on the success side, right? You become a company, you've been in business for a period of time, is developing bureaucracies and
Hmm.
developing systems for systems sake. And what I have found, and so yeah, I've headed up quality at large companies, several large companies. And one of the things that I always do when I get to those new companies is I look at their systems. And one of the things that's kind of cool about what I do is I get to play in a lot of different areas because systems go beyond quality. It's operations and legal and communications and marketing and sales and procurement. All of the groups are involved with quality. So I get to play in a lot of different areas. And this is why the philosophical approach that I have probably is appealing to me because it's the same thing in business. Right? What is it? How do I know? And what do I do about it? Okay, here's a potential company for sale. What is it? Right? How do I know?
Hmm.
Okay, well, do these type of things. All right, what am I going to do about it? Well, I'm going to evaluate their balance sheets. I'm going to go into the room and look at the financials, and we're going to make it all these type of things, right? But we had a really good saying at a company, a CEO had at one of my previous companies, and it stuck with me, and I still use it to this day. And he said, as a company, this was in a big team, a big meeting of all the employees in the company. He said, I have one overriding rule, and that's we will be easy to do business with.
Hmm.
If we have systems in place that make it hard for our customers or our consumers or anyone to interact with us, we need to remove those systems. I was like, whoa,
Hmm.
that's brilliant. Because I've been on the receiving end of that. And I'm working with a company right now who is going through that. And we're trying to get a new supplier. And every request we make is, oh, well, we can't do that. We'll have to run it by our lawyer. And well, no, we can't say that. We'll give you this watered down. No, it's just like, no, 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 no. And your response is, okay, I may have to do business with these people for now, but as soon as I can remove them,
Hmm.
I'm going to find somebody that's easier to work with. And that's a valuable lesson for anyone in business to remember is to take that perspective and to switch the chair around and put yourself in the chair of the person that you're speaking with and say, how can I make their life easier? How can I make this process simpler for them? We're seeing amazing developments in this area with the internet and texting and things like this. I use one of these fresh food services for my dog to order fresh food, and their service is amazing. So you go through and you do quizzes, and then you figure out for your particular breed and the age of the breed and the health of the dog and the weight of the dog, and then they come back with customized recipes for the food for your dog. And then they set up emails and they send you emails on, oh, hey, here's some information on dog health and here's some information on this and these and it's at just the right because we've all been inundated with too much information, right?
Interesting.
And the way they've tied it together and branded it and everything is just like, oh, right? It's beautiful. And they're expensive, but I don't care because it's my dog and they're so easy to do business with, right? Very valuable
And
lesson.
and I have a question there because I've been helping in Latin America and all over the world for the last 8 years people scale their sales, and we always talk about systems, right? Like sales systems that
Hmm.
make it easy to scale both the commercial side of it and the delivery of it. But my experience for the last 8 years with 75,000 clients that we have in our academy has been mostly with people that are either starting out or up to maybe 30, $50 million of sales per year. And I know
Right.
that you've worked in companies that do hundreds of millions of dollars per year.
Right.
And it's very interesting that systems, once put in place inside the company, they'll, if initially, they will make things more agile, right? But then the company starts growing, and there's a point where systems are now no longer meant to make you agile or to speed things up or to save time. They're just made to protect you. And it's a different stage of the company, right? When you're doing hundreds
Yeah.
of millions of dollars, you're not necessarily looking to go out and eat the market and be agile. And like Facebook, originally their motto was move fast and break things. It'd be kind of scary to have $1 billion plus company going and breaking stuff all around the place, which they're kind of still doing, but that's another
Sure.
thing. And so, how do multinational companies that are on this huge level deal with systems becoming a risk, because that's a story, right? They grow, they have so many systems, they go on defense with their systems. Everything is just like you said, like, we want to innovate here. No, we can't do that. We can't do that. We can't do that. And then eventually a smaller company comes in and bits their butt up, and they're just like, it's the market share.
Yeah.
How can big companies actually avoid that?
Yeah, I have a good example of that. So the larger a company gets, it becomes about creating fiefdoms. Right? So if I'm in charge of procurement,
Mm-hmm.
my job is not to produce products that'll make consumers happy and produce, more business. No, it's to protect procurement, right? My job is to, and when you're in
Mm.
a large company with, let's say you're the senior vice president of procurement for a large company and you have thousands of people who are working for you, that's all you think about, right? You're not thinking about the bigger picture. I worked for a large brewery and they wanted to come up with a novel new product using the waste from making beer, right? Huge, huge potential there. And they said, okay, well, we recognize that we're a very large company that doesn't move very quickly. So we're going to produce a small entrepreneurial company inside of our company that will be able to do things independently, and they can move and they can do all these things and
Mm-hmm.
be agile. They'll be a startup company. Okay. So that was the premise to start. Did it work? Failed horribly.
Mm.
Because we would come up with an idea and you'd be like, oh, we should do this. And how about if we try it like this and things like this? And then somebody would go, oh, whoa, whoa, whoa. We need to run that past the vice president of whatever.
Hmm. So it
And
was an independent cell, but it was still stuck to all the bureaucracy.
right. They did not decouple the bureaucracy from it. And it crashed and
Hmm.
burned and it was so sad.
And the thing is that if you do that, because I've heard of other companies doing that model, right? Like, split up these five really talented guys, just give them a mission and have them go for it more in a startup style. Um, I think companies, I don't know what was the issue here, but if you give them another brand, if they're kind of like even another company, they're not related to you, they're very independent. Because I can understand, like, multinational companies, they might be scared of like, bad things happening over there, and they're that hurting their brand, but they should be fine in this case. And why was it that they didn't allow this to breathe and grow?
Well, I think it all boils down to, Chris, is the bottom line is even if you break off a small company like this and you say, okay, guys, have fun, you still report to somebody, right?
Mm-hmm.
You still have to give weekly reports. You still have to meet the P&L. You still have to do all the things that a big company does. If you really wanted to do this, it would be, okay, you five guys, here, your own company, here is $5 million in seed money. We'll see you in 6 months.
Yep.
Go be successful. But no, it's right. No, large companies are not built that way. Large companies are built to buy small companies and integrate them into the company, not the other way around.
It's interesting, and that explains. Like, if you look at, I remember a couple of years back, I went to LA and we had a tour. I was in this mastermind group, and we went to SpaceX, the Elon's rocket company. And
Uh-huh.
one of the things that I was really impressed at was that we had a walking tour while everybody was working. I didn't see a single person over 35.
Hmm.
And I was impressed at how much he was betting on young talent. And a lot of the guys that we spoke with over there that gave us a tour was like, the cool thing about SpaceX, if you compare it to NASA or to like old school companies about space travel, is that they've allowed, and I don't know if it's still the case right now, but an ecosystem where new ideas can be made a reality in a very agile way. So
Yeah.
that's interesting. You can say all about Elon that you want to say, but he's an interesting character that's getting stuff done.
Yeah, and he's not afraid to fail. Right. Oh,
Hmm.
well, that didn't work. All right. Well, we blew up that rocket. Darn it.
Yeah.
Let's build another one.
Yeah, and you know who's very funny as well? Like Mark Zuckerberg, he's got the charisma of a lizard, right? Like, he's really not a guy that I can always picture like his board meetings, like, please, Mark, don't do the announcement. We have somebody that's a little bit more charming than you, and he's like just fighting because he likes a microphone, because he's really not charismatic at all. But out of all of the big tech companies, he's the one that I have to go, like, he's got nerve. Like, he, with that, a company that size, betting on the metaverse and announcing it like it was, then betting on now Threads, this new Twitter app that's like competing with Twitter and stuff. When you look at Google and other tech companies, I don't see them being so adventurous, because in tech usually the one that hits first is not the one that's successful at the end. It's kind of like the one that hits first, kind of like MySpace, and then it drops down, and then other people pick up the pieces and they build an idea. But he's extremely intense with that stuff, and I think I've heard him in an interview that he's very competitive. I think I've heard you said that you don't like Mark Zuckerberg a lot, or do you?
Well, it kind of gets back to the people thing, right? So,
Mm,
and it's the same for leadership as well, right? You have to have leadership that is charismatic and communicate. The bottom line is the skill set that an entrepreneur needs to build and grow a business is completely different than the skill set of a CEO. And there are very few examples of people who are successful at both.
mhm.
Most companies where the entrepreneur tries to take over the CEO role in his company fails. Right?
Mhm.
There's rare exceptions to that.
It's being a startup entrepreneur versus being like a consolidated business owner that's handling a lot of people. They're almost like contradictory. It's
Right.
very different, the skill set that you need. But
Yeah.
Brian, dude, thank you so much for being here. I loved having this conversation with you. For everybody that's listening to us, please go to Amazon, get Brian's book, The New Manager Mindset. It's a great book. I've read it in the past. We didn't get to talk much about it this time, but we'll have you back in the podcast one day. And where else can they follow you, dude? Do you have one particular social media that you want them to find you at?
Yeah, if you want to check out my podcast, and you can check that out on the easiest way is LinkedIn. So connect with me on LinkedIn. Just find me on there. So Brian Armentrout, Bryan, and last name Armentrout. There's not many of us out there, and join us for the live streams on Fridays. And it's like this, and we take questions. I bring an expert on in the field, and it's not a lecture. It's kind of like this. It's a ton of fun. So that's the best way to interact with me.
Love it. So go find Brian Armentrout on LinkedIn. And guys, thank you for being a part of this first episode of the Chris Ursua podcast. See you soon.
And thank you, Chris.